Selena Banks, certified financial planning professional and small business coach based here in Austin, Texas. Welcome back to your financial therapy for the week. As always, thank you for tuning in. Before we get started, I need to ask you, if you're enjoying the show, please like, subscribe, give us a review wherever you're listening or watching. I'd really appreciate that. So today we're going to be talking about kind of a deep topic, financial infidelity. Most of the time I have friends with me to talk about these concerns. This was it felt kind of like a solo episode today. And, I think a lot of people probably don't even think about financial infidelity in their relationships, their close relationships, but it is a very real thing. And as I said, a heavy topic that I'd love to start a conversation about. So, I just want to thank you again for tuning in. We've gotten some great reception, especially on some of our kind of tougher topics. So this is going to continue the pattern, hopefully. And let's start because, it might be a new term for some folks. Let's start by defining financial infidelity. So, and then we'll get deeper into talking about some of the signs and what you can do about them. And so this episode is titled 5 Signs, Financial Infidelity, 5 Signs and What You Can Do About Them, because I think it's really important to not just have an awareness about these kinds of things happening in your financial life and in your financial relationships, but also some practical tips to deal with them or to address them in some sort of way. So we're going to talk about 5 signs of financial infidelity, and then we're going to talk about what you can do about them. But first, let's define the term. So financial infidelity occurs when a partner in a committed relationship intentionally lies or keeps financial secrets from the other partner. This can take many forms, including hiding debts, secret bank accounts or credit cards, making large purchases without consulting your partner, or lying about your income and your expenses. So it runs the gamut, as you might imagine, but the general gist is being untrue to your partner in the financial sense. So you are breaching trust with your partner. And so really any time that you're not including your partner fully as a member of your financial management team, it does tend to be a problem. As a certified financial planning professional, we are coached, and we coach our clients to always bring your partner to the conversation. If we have a meeting with a client, we want their spouse to be part of that meeting. We want their financial partner to be part of that conversation. So it's always important to have an open and honest financial relationship, and financial infidelity kind of destroys that, to be quite frank about it. So I do think, though, that the behaviors surrounding financial infidelity might be kind of hard to recognize. And it might be hard to recognize what's problematic versus just being kind of a good steward of the peace and, not trying to rock the boat. What's too much information, to share with your partner. So, and all of us are different. You don't necessarily need to share every detail of your life with your partner. That removes some of the mystery from the relationship. So, if you go get your nails and your hair done, you probably don't want to necessarily say every time, here's what I'm going to be spending on my maintenance, darling. But I have some ways, like I said, some practical tips that you can use to kind of address some of the qualities and characteristics that might be at play with financial infidelity, and kind of get yourself on a good path. So the other thing I wanted to mention, well, a couple more things before we get started. We're talking about financial infidelity today, but some things that I am going to mention might also cross over into financial abuse. And That is a very real thing too. It is a different sort of situation. It's almost two sides of the control coin. So whereas financial infidelity often has to do with behaviors where a person is out of control of their spending or their earning, financial abuse tends to happen when someone wants to exert an inordinate amount of control over their spending, or their earning power, their spouse's spending or earning power. And so that's there are two sides of the same coin. So I want to say up front, if you are triggered by anything that I talk about today in this episode, then please seek some assistance. Financial abuse is domestic abuse, and it is very important that when you are being economically abused in your relationship that you have the tools to recognize that. And so hopefully this helps folks in that situation as well. The other thing I'll say about that is we will have an episode on financial abuse, which is, of course, another heavy topic. But as I mentioned, they are very intertwined, and I think it's so important for us to talk about them in a reasonable way, and so that we can all recognize the signs, and again, what you can do about them. And the final thing I will say before we get started with our 5 signs of financial infidelity and what you can do about them is that this is not about shaming anyone. This podcast is very important to me. It's very important that we have conversations and that we become more aware about what we're doing, what our relationships are with money, and how we deal with our close friends and family with regard to money. So I really want to stress that up front, that, you know, when one person has control or does not have control over their finances within a relationship, that is something that is obviously very personal. It can be very private. It can be very can bring up a lot of depression, shame, guilt. And so the last thing that I want to do with this podcast is to further those emotions. But I do think that it's important that if you are experiencing any of these signs in your relationship, that you have some of the tools to recognize that, so that you can make a change. Hopefully you can make a shift. Hopefully you can do something a little bit differently, because now you can recognize some of the ways that we're maybe not making the best choices as far as finances in our relationship. So financial infidelity, as I mentioned, it really often happens when a person is too secretive or untrusting of their partner in that relationship to communicate and tell that person what's going on. So I think another thing I want to mention here is that financial infidelity doesn't necessarily have to do 100% with spending money and not telling your partner. It could also be passive. So maybe not spending when your partner expects you to or needs you to or is asking you to. It could be not earning or looking hard for a job in order to be a contributor to income for the family. It could be maybe not lying, but just not engaging, avoiding conversations about money that are important to the management of the household, or just omitting truth and facts from your partner. It's very difficult to manage a budget if you're on the other side of the coin, right? If you're in the management control space of money, and that's the space that you kind of need to watch out for. It can be really difficult to be in that position if your partner is very hands-off with money and with money decisions and very unforthcoming with financial information. So financial infidelity can look like a range of things, and so I want to be clear that it's not just about lying about your spending, hiding your packages in the trunk, though that is part of it. So let's get started. Let's talk about some signs of financial infidelity and what you can do about them. So the first sign is that there's a lot of secrecy around spending, and there might be a change in your ability to pay necessary bills, or there might be an unexpected shortage of money. So this could look like you're trying to spend some money at the coffee shop, and all of a sudden your card gets declined, and you're like, nah, there's no way that that's the case. It might be that you are constantly moving money over from savings because those little charges go through, but they're not actually budgeted for, and so you start kind of getting away from what the actual plan is for those dollars. It could be something where your spouse does have a shopping habit and over shops. I was watching this actually Ring video where a guy is yelling at the delivery guy through the Ring camera because he's so upset that his spouse has spent more money on more things. Lord knows what the things are, but this guy's totally upset. And so when there is just not a lot of communication around the spending, and you're surprised by things happening, by things showing up, and those things could have an impact on your ability to pay bills. They could not have a direct impact on your ability to pay bills. Either way, it can feel like a slight. It can feel like something where you and your partner are not aligned, not on the same page. You can't quite trust that if you kind of go with the status quo, that your partner is going to be spending and earning according to your expectations and your plans. And so one thing that you can do about this when it shows up in your financial relationships is just ask. Be specific. Understand what actually is going on with your bills, what the difference is between a necessity and a discretionary expense. Just having those kinds of conversations and being very specific about what the expectations are can go a hugely long way in making sure that you have at least the funds for basics like rent or your mortgage, your bills, your utilities, your kids' expenses and needs, things like that, and that you guys are not spending to where someone else is unable to do what they need to do because you're not on the same page. So the first thing is there's a lot of secrecy around spending. And I think the key way to address it would be to acknowledge that, communicate, ask, be specific about what your necessities versus your discretionary spending should be looking like. All right, so the second sign of financial infidelity, there's a change in your living conditions or your standard of living that hasn't been explained to you. And this could look like your partner not wanting to have budget discussions, your partner wanting to move or wanting to shift gears as far as your living arrangements or your living situation, and you're not quite sure what's going on. This could also be, it's sad but true, but I have spoken with people before, potential clients whose spouse or significant other has mortgaged their home without their knowledge, has stopped paying the mortgage without their knowledge, and it's just, obviously a huge betrayal to be making those financial decisions without your actual partner in play. And so, when your partner doesn't want to have those conversations about money and finances, and you are seeing changes in your living conditions, your standard of living, for instance, they're buying a cheaper version of all of the groceries that you might have had in the past, or bargain shopping for clothing. There's nothing wrong with any of those decisions, of course, but if those things are happening and you two have not discussed the necessity for that, that's probably a sign that there may be some financial infidelity going on. And so how would you address this? I think the best way to address this is really to have regular budget meetings where you access and audit the accounts together. So you try to understand your partner's needs, you try to understand their spending habits, their earning potential, their desired spending habits, and then you can agree to disagree on little things, but you really want to get to agreement on the big spend items. And you can even that is a decision that you can agree or disagree on what encompasses big spending. And it's okay to have some healthy conflict around these discussions, but you really do want to get to at least an agreement where you understand where the other person is coming from, and not. And if you have a discrepancy of $100 here or there on where to spend your money, or what someone might be needing to earn or contribute to the general fund, that's a small thing. If you can't decide whether eating at such and such restaurant is a necessity or a discretionary expense, hint, it's a discretionary expense, then you probably need to have some deeper conversations, and maybe even consult some learning materials, some educational materials to help both of you guys get on the same page. So having those discussions, those budget discussions, and like I said, accessing your accounts together and really kind of looking to see where there might be some discrepancies in your understanding of spending habits. All right, the next potential sign of financial infidelity is that there are unexplained or unplanned withdrawals from your accounts or purchases you weren't made aware of. So this is similar to the changing standard of living, but it's also kind of I think maybe a more big picture situation. So I had a client once tell me that her husband purchased a car without her knowledge, and on its face, it seems kind of silly, but I feel like that probably happens very often because, again, we're not having necessarily these conversations ahead of time to plan ahead of time and ensure that any sort of impulse buying or spending on things that you need but in ways that you might not have agreed on doesn't just kind of happen. So what I think for this is going back to having legitimate budget conversations, is that you need to have an agreement on what to spend and what to spend on. And one good way to do that is to have a conversation about, okay, who's putting what into the bucket, and that might be disproportionate based on your income levels. So, there might be a general fund, everybody puts into the general fund for non-discretionary expenses, so everything that you absolutely must pay. And then everybody keeps a small allowance for discretionary expenses. That is a personal budget that you have, that you control, that you manage. And my thought process with this, and what I've told couples that I've coached before, is that discretionary bucket for each of you every month should be the same amount, no matter who makes what. That's kind of my way of sectioning out a bit of fairness in a relationship where somebody makes a whole lot more and somebody makes a whole lot less. If you can disproportionately supply to the general fund fixed expenses, then you have a little bit more to split between you for discretionary expenses, and those I think should be on equal footing. So The way that I feel like you get beyond unexplained or unplanned purchases or withdrawals that the other person isn't made aware of is to spend out of that personal budget. So you can save it each month. If you guys agree on what it's going to be and one of you is a total spender and one of you is a total saver, great. Because that saver at the end of the year, maybe they'll have more money to do a big trip or do a, something like that. And the spender has had that awesome dopamine hit of getting, the new Xbox or whatever it is throughout the year. So I feel like if you make it fair, if you set out to make it intentionally fair, you don't have a whole lot of guilt or shame about spending those dollars, and you also don't have a whole lot of issues with, oh, I haven't told my partner this and I need to tell my partner that I'm going to spend this. Well, no. Actually, we've agreed on this set amount per month. I've saved this up. I'm allowed to spend it, and it's not an unexplained or unplanned withdrawal. It's something that, you can do what you want with. So that's my fix for sign number 3. So sign number 4 that you may have some financial infidelity going on in your relationship is that you have a high level of consumer or other debt that can't be explained by purchases you're aware of. So again, just being caught unaware. I think it's really important to highlight that every single one of these signs is really about breaches of trust in some sort of fashion. And if you go through the motions of communicating with your partner, even on the uncomfortable things, and kind of being intentional in creating a plan, I think that eliminates a lot of these breaches of trust, because I don't necessarily believe when my clients are talking to me about their spending habits, and one of them is clearly the spender and the other is clearly the annoyed person who's like, please stop spending the money. Neither one of them is doing it maliciously, of course. So it really is about, okay, let's sit and have some conversations, and doing these steps will help you at least get eyes on what's going on in your financial relationship and have a conversation with your partner. It gives you the opportunity to have the conversation. So if you have a high level of consumer or other debt that can't be explained by purchases you're aware of, then you're probably not having those regular conversations with your partner. Because I guarantee you, if it's a large amount of debt, it's getting paid from somewhere. They might be just scraping by, making minimum payments. It might be something where they are hiding the purchases from you, but debt has to get paid. There are very few ways to make it out without paying it. And in some cases, if you owe the federal government, for example, that debt's never going away. So my thought for you may feel a bit harsh, but I would get on Credit Karma with your partner and have a conversation about your credit report. I very highly value my 800 plus credit score. Sometimes it dips below that, and I have to breathe a little bit, and it's because I am very diligent about my credit. I don't like when I have anything going on that I could manage better with respect to my credit report and my debt management. And that's really because I like being a good credit risk. If I need money, I can get money because I'm a good risk. And I am that way because I've done the work with my credit to be that way. And so managing that is a very serious thing for me. It helps me invest in myself, my kid, my investments. And so I feel like it's one of the places where you can do just a little bit of monitoring and stave off a lot of big problems. So do it together, make it a thing, you know. Grab a glass of wine and look at your credit report. Ooh. Nobody's ever going to do that, but I will give it a shot anyway. All right, so the number 5 sign that you may have some financial infidelity going on in your relationship is that you feel stressed about money even though your partner doesn't seem to be. So I think the important thing to think about here is that when you have successes, you should celebrate your successes, but when you are not yet to your financial values, goals, and you're not necessarily focused heavily on your financial priorities, you should have like a real conversation about what it's going to take to get there. And so, just have you ever agreed, ask yourselves, what does financial success actually look like? What would it feel like to be comfortable financially? How much would that take? And set some goals on where you'd like to be together. Because if you feel stressed about money and your partner doesn't seem to be, that signals that you're not on the same page either about what you're earning together or what you're spending together or what your financial goals are in general. And so when there's that lack of clarity, that lack of certainty, it can be very stressful. It can feel very much like you're not on the right track. And the important thing I think to say here is that I have coached many a client who is actually well on the right track. They just don't understand it because they haven't actually put it on paper. They haven't actually seen that, oh my gosh, I'm much better off than I actually thought I was. I can actually do financially what I wasn't aware I could, or, oh, I see how this path forward works and what maybe I'd have to sacrifice in order to get there. But being on the same page as far as what to even sacrifice in order to get to the next level is a stress reliever in and of itself. Instead of trying to do all the things, you guys have an agreement that, you know what, actually this part doesn't matter. This part is what really matters. And then you can move forward together. So let me run back through those again, the 5 signs of financial infidelity. The first one is there's lots of secrecy around spending and or a change in your ability to pay your necessary bills, or there's an unexpected shortage of money. My remedy for this is to ask and be specific about what the budget looks like for both discretionary and non-discretionary expenses. Number 2 is there's a change in your living conditions or a standard of living that hasn't been explained to you. And my remedy for this would be to have regular budget meetings where you access and audit your accounts together. So you want to talk about your partner's needs for spending, your partner's earning potential, and your spending habits and earning potential during these conversations. Agree on what you can, on the little things. You can have some conflict, but definitely agree on the big spending items, the big places that you're going for spending and for earning. The number 3 sign is unexplained or unplanned withdrawals from your accounts or purchases you're not made aware of. You can get beyond this by having a monthly expense limit that both of you guys receive as kind of an allowance toward any personal purchases that you'd like to make. Anything beyond that is something that you guys discuss as a team. Number 4 is you have a high level of consumer or other debt that can't be explained by the purchases you're aware of. My remedy for this is to get real down and dirty and check your credit reports together. You can do that on creditkarma.com for free. It's great. I love it because you can monitor your debt and your relationship together, but then you can also make sure that you're not a victim of fraud. The number 5 and last way that, or last sign that I think could signal there might be financial infidelity happening in your relationship is that you feel stressed about money even though your partner doesn't seem to be. And this could be because you are the person spending the money and you're not supposed to be spending that money, and you feel guilt, shame, or some level of stress about it. Or it could be that you see money disappearing and you are unclear why that's happening or why you can't ever get ahead, and your partner is maybe blissfully ignorant. Maybe they're not blissfully ignorant, maybe they're feeling it too, but they just won't admit to you until you have a real sit-down conversation. So that is the remedy for that last sign, is to have some sort of a conversation about what financial success looks like and how you're going to get there, because if you're not on the same page, if you're not both feeling the same feels, then you're going to run into problems, uncertainty at the very least in the future. So thanks so much for joining me for this episode. Thanks again to everyone who's listening, watching the show. I'm really excited about how much interest there is in the show, and I'll be back next week with another episode. We will be talking about financial abuse, as I mentioned at the start, and so please tune in for that, because I think these are intertwined and, as I mentioned, both sides of the same coin. So I love hearing from you guys. Please call, text to submit your feedback and questions for the show. You can do that at 1-844-4FINPOD. That's 1-844-434-6763. I would love for you to text us to let us know what you think and what you want us to talk about on the show. So until then, see you next week, guys.